Well, welcome to Your Nurse Advocates Conversations with Your Nurse. Linda and I are here. We are very pleased to have, we've got a special guest with us, retired Sgt Mike Hayden from the Milwaukee Police Department. Hello. And welcome, Mike. And so we're going to get into a topic that we've talked a little bit about in the past, and that's, elder abuse, elder scam. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll get our PowerPoint presentation up, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Sounds good.
Okay. And just real briefly, as we were introducing Mike, he's had 25 years in the Milwaukee Police Department, been a field training officer, been on the Tactical Enforcement Unit, which is SWAT. Now, Mike, real quick, how did they get SWAT out of Tactical Enforcement Unit?
SWAT is a term coined in the 60s by the LAPD. That's what they called it. They called it their Special Weapons and Tactics team.
Okay.
Whereas us, we were actually formed before the LAPD SWAT in Milwaukee, and ours was called the Tactical Enforcement Unit.
Gotcha. Okay.
Different departments call it different things, but we all are we're all members of the National Tactical Officers Association, stuff like that. We all do the same job.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
So we're going to spend just a couple of minutes briefly going through what different types of scams are, and then we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Linda and Mike so we can get into how the police department and law enforcement can help our elders. But probably one of the most common ones that we see, and Linda will talk a little bit about that, is the grandparent scam. And I think one of the things that, as Linda and I were talking and preparing for this, one of the things I think that bothered me the most is how they're now volunteering to come to your home and pick up the money. So it's, that puts a whole nother layer of fear in there.
Oh no, that makes it exponentially more dangerous, because they're not just hoping you'll go to, go to your local, Target or something, get gift cards and then mail them to them, and they hope they get them. They're now putting themselves in physical close proximity to you. And now they're in a position where they have direct physical control over you, not just hopefully you'll go along with what they suggested on the phone before talking to somebody else. And that may be one of the reasons is they now physically are involved in the situation, and you're less likely to, the victim is less likely to ask for help from somebody else, because now there's a physical interaction with them. Whereas if it's just a voice on the phone or someone like that, it's, they're more likely to call a friend or a family member and say, hey, does this sound legit to you? But if the person's like, okay, I'm going to be there in 20 minutes or, whatever, now they feel like they've made a plan. The person feels more committed. The victim feels more committed to the scam because they have committed to someone coming over. So now they're like, well, I'm not going to call anybody now. And then when the person gets there, it's extremely dangerous, because now the person can decide, they can decide situationally whether, okay, am I just going to take these cards, or can I actually physically take things from this person now because they have no other resources available to them right now to protect them? I'm just going to do whatever I want. So that makes it exponentially more dangerous when they choose to show up physically.
In preparing for this, I read an article, and a woman who was a retired 911 dispatcher, she actually
for a couple of years too.
She actually got one of these calls, and she told them to go ahead and come to the house and pick up the money. And after she hung up, she called 911. And so by the time the person came to pick up the money, the police officers were there and they were able to make an arrest. Now, I'm not the professional here, Mike. So I'm going to ask you, would you recommend someone doing that, or what in that situation, what would you recommend?
I think maybe she felt a little more comfortable doing it because she had a direct relationship with law enforcement or emergency services or whatever. But the simple fact is, she still allowed herself to now have physical contact, close proximity. They know what she looks like. They're more committed to it now. So they're going to be more angry that she set them up. So now she's a bigger target to them. And the biggest thing you can do is cut it off right at the beginning. Don't play games with them. You don't know who these people are. If they're a smaller part of a larger organized crime thing, there's always violence involved. Nothing is ever just money. So me being a cop, I'm going to set someone up, have them come to my house. I don't want them to know where I live. I don't want them to know where I work. I don't want to meet them in a Walmart so they know I live around there. I would just, the best thing, the safest thing to do is, no thanks, click, hang up, even if it's a scam. I mean, I as a cop have gotten, while actually employed, still before I retired, would get the scam calls, oh, hi, yeah, this is the IRS. If you don't make this payment, we're going to put out a warrant for your arrest. Oh, that's interesting. I would tell them, I'd be like, because now all they have at this point is my phone number in theory, saying, oh, really? Yeah, I'm a police officer. Why don't you tell me, where the warrant's going to be issued, and I'll go ahead and go and turn myself in and stuff like that. But messing with them on the phone is one thing. Once you set up an in-person meeting, what if they got away? What if they, and not only that, police departments just don't have the resources to arrest people for crimes that are about to happen. Most departments are busy responding to things that have already happened, and generally later than everybody would like. So, to set someone up in advance for a possible, conviction down the road for some sort of fraud scheme, which are hard to prove and convict anyways, that she was wasting everybody's time, including her own, and putting herself and everybody else's who responded to it, even the officers' safety in jeopardy, because she could have just hung up. And if everybody just hung up, they would move on to a different crime.
Great points. Which brings to the next type of scam is either Medicare, IRS, health insurance, telling you that you owe money or that you need, you don't have enough coverage. I had not heard this one before, but fake prescriptions. I did not know that was going on, where people will call you, tell you that they can get you medications at a much cheaper rate. By the time your check cashes 3 days later, gets to the bank, finds out, that there's a scam that's it's long over with.
Anytime anybody calls you, you should be suspicious. If somebody's calling you, they're selling something, whether it's crime, a criminal, endeavor, or whether it's some sort of, even if it's some sort of economic thing, that a business that they've decided, oh, we can scam someone out of this or that. I mean, it's never on the up and up unless you're calling them. If someone's calling you, they're calling you to try to get something from you. And when they're trying to get something from you, they're going to tell you things that they want you to hear in order to get that from you. And even if it's a legitimate company, even if it's your cable company calling to say, hey, we've got a great deal, we want to renew your contract. I mean, there's a benefit to them that, is probably outweighs the benefit to you, or else they wouldn't be doing it. So, and on the criminal side, I mean, you just want to steer clear of that completely. If they call you, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, that sounds great. Can I have a number I can call you back at? Because I have to run, or I'm going to talk to my wife and give you a call back, and they'll do everything they can not to give you a number to call them back. And that's how you know it's fake. And they will hang up on you. They won't even give you a fake number. When you start asking them questions, they'll hang up.
That's true.
If they give you a number to call back and you call back, then now you can say, okay, there might be some legitimacy to this.
One of the things that, with Linda and I having a hospice background, this really bothered me a lot. I mean, is the people that watch the obituaries and they prey on these widowers that have just lost their spouse, they're elderly, and now they're claiming to be someone that they owe them money. And we know that it is true that families, can be responsible for the debt left behind for families. So this is such an opportunistic scam, but I just makes me think these people just don't have any scruples, morals, or anything.
No, and they don't. I mean, ethics and morals, those are things that people possess because they were raised a certain way or chose to be that way. Generally speaking, if they don't have any moral compass that's guiding them, they don't feel bad for victims. The victim is someone that they don't care about. It's benefiting them. So what's wrong with it? It's good for them. Situational ethics, it's called. When something's good for me, then it's good. If it's bad for me, then it's bad, regardless if it's the same situation. So they have no problem with taking your things because it's good for them.
And then, the next one is just investment scams, preying on the elderly, making them worry that they don't have enough money put away for retirement. So they're going to sell them, fake investments. And I didn't realize, this is something, being romantically or courted romantically, I thought this was something
that's on the list. Absolutely.
and that's something, like I said, it's something I think we watch on the movies, but you don't really think it happens. And
well, it happens. I mean, these days it's very popular because I mean, it's called phishing or catfishing, or, where someone pretends to be someone else other than they are in order to get something from you. And the problem with most of the scams is they're not, if they are crimes, they're very hard to prosecute because the paper trails are just impossible to even get to. They do the gift card thing. So there's no paper trail of any type. Any kind of financial fraud cases, they are reported to the police department. The police department starts to look into it. The detective, they call the credit card companies and the whatevers and the victims and it's really hard to prove that there was a crime committed, a crime committed. Doesn't mean there's not a civil case or something like that. But, when you have someone, like you said, the romantic thing, if you have it, that's as old as time, the gold digger, where you have, the young woman who marries the old guy and, the whole family's saying she's just trying to take his money. And even if she is, and even if they can prove that there were some nefarious dealings involved or writing of checks or forging or whatever, all stuff that's so time consuming and labor intensive and hard to prove criminally that, the family is just, well, I don't have the money to hire the best lawyers in the world to track these people down and private detectives. And so it's easy for them. That's one of the, a lot of these crimes, a lot of these scams are hard to prosecute as crimes.
And then we've got vacation, timeshares, charity scams, fake charities, COVID. They're trying to, I was reading too, that they try and sell you fake test kits or tell you can go get your COVID shots. And it
that
just
was actually in the news recently. There was a whole company that was getting paid by the government to give free COVID testing to, whatever underprivileged people in whatever community. And people got like false positives and whatever, and all these weird results. So they called other people and said, hey, what's going on? This doesn't seem right. So then someone looked into it and it was just a complete scam. They were just taking money from the government, poking people in the arms or taking swabs or whatever. And then just not even testing anything, just mailing off random results and just raking in the money.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yep. So it's something you should always, and again, the problem with the elderly is, the older they get and the less independent they are, the more susceptible they are to those things. And when you were saying like, I forget what scam you named, but they like to feel like they're helping. They like to, when you get the scammer that calls and says, hey, do you want to support your local police department, your local fire department? Well, of course I do, and they're just so quick to send off money. Or if it's something that they think, oh, my kids would love this. And, this is their time. They're thinking, oh yeah, I've always wanted to do this, or I've always wanted to give them that, or I've always wanted to provide this. And now maybe I can. And, and they make more emotional choices and, have less, fewer stops along the way, or fewer checks and balances to help them decide whether it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And just briefly going into the 4 types of elder abuse, we've got neglect, where they're poorly cared for, financial, people are taking their social security checks or disability checks, emotional, verbal, and abuse. They like to impose guilt. The senior already feels bad because they feel like a burden and they just
exactly
focus on that. And then we have your, the physical. So Mike, in your experience, which one of these, or is it equal? I mean, have you seen the most of?
Well, I would say the most as a police officer that you deal with elderly, with crimes against the elderly is generally physical or property crimes. Physical crimes, whether it be battery, whether it be physical abuse, someone, and like I said, generally it's a family member who's physically extorting money from them or property from, or things from them through physical threats, or actually, causing physical injury. And the property crimes, literally family stealing things every time they come over, or writing checks, with their checkbook. That's the majority of crimes that the police usually investigate are going to be on a regular basis would be more like the batteries, the sexual assaults even. I mean, those are the worst, you know, and, you know, you have women, you know, old women, lives by herself, husband died, you know, and if they live, you know, if there's horrible people that are willing to take advantage of that, I mean, any crime is they have the potential to have any crime committed against them physically and property wise. And police departments deal with those more. When it comes to the financial stuff, again, if it's something that they think they can prove, but again, elderly people aren't going to think to call the police when they got financially scammed, you know, especially if it's a family member, they just feel suckered. And if it's a stranger, they feel suckered. And so, you know, they don't realize that if they did report it, and it's very important to, if they did report it, they might give the missing piece of the puzzle, because the piece of information that they had was the missing piece of information from all these other cases. So it is important that they report things that they don't think are going to be followed up on or investigated, because all the pieces are important. So, you know, when they are a victim of a crime, as silly as they think it might be to call the police, or as guilty as they might feel, or as embarrassed, that they need to call them, because the reason is all criminal organizations, they don't leave everything at one scene. They'll make one mistake here, one mistake there, one mistake there. And when that person calls, that might be the one missing piece that allows them to prosecute everybody. So it's really important that they call, even with the things. I mean, it's obvious to call if you've been sexually assaulted or beaten up, or, you know, someone broke into your house or stole your things, or, you know, that's obvious to them. But it's really important for them to call, even with the scams, or, you know, the things that they're more embarrassed about, because that might, I mean, they're definitely crimes. It's just they're harder to piece together. But if nobody calls, you can't piece them together at all.
Hey, Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you said you had some questions for Mike, but now want to turn into with Mike's expertise, just what can they do? What are their recourses, and what is, you know, the law enforcement's role in assisting them? So Linda, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, so Mike and I had talked before about this, and, you know, I was a learning experience for me, because I really felt that, you know, well, when my parents went through this grandparent scam, I said, well, let's call the police. Well, it really isn't, because a crime has not been committed and there's limited resources. There's really not a lot that the police were going to do. My father, being 90 years old, picked up the phone, and someone on the other phone said, "Hi, Grandpa, this is your granddaughter, and I'm here in New Jersey, and I'm in jail. I had a traffic stop, and I was drinking, and they arrested me, and I need bail money to get out." And he's like, "Who is this?" And she said, "Don't you recognize my voice? It's your granddaughter." And he knew her name. He actually said that, or she said, "This is your granddaughter," and said her name. And then he actually thought it was her. And he actually thought, he says, "Well," she says, "I need you to talk to my attorney." So a gentleman got on the phone and said, "Well, I'm her attorney. You need to be able to post bond for her so that she can get out. She's going to have a court date, but this is the money we need, and she needs money now."
That additional person adds legitimacy to it too.
Exactly. Exactly. And then he said, "Well, how much is her bail?" He said, "Well," he says, "because she was drinking and she was arrested, it's going to be about $3,000. He said, "Can you give us a card over the phone so that she can get out?" He says, "I don't have that kind of money in the house. I would have to go to the bank and get it." "Well, that's fine. You know, we have law offices where you live, and I can get one of my partners to go over to the house, take you to the bank, get this money, and we can wire it right. He can wire it right up here, and we can get your granddaughter safely back to her home." He said, "Is this something that we can do?" And he's like, "Wait a minute. I don't know. I don't know. He says, "I'm confused." And he started asking more questions. He said, well, the gentleman on the phone started getting a little more agitated with him, because he wasn't really responding.
Right. Probably more forceful too, because now he's trying to intimidate him into it, not just scam him.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, you need to do this. Otherwise your granddaughter is going to be spending her days in jail until she goes to court. And right now the jails are overcrowded and she could get hurt." And he says, "Well, you know what? I need to call my daughter." I need to call my daughter, and you're going to need to speak to my wife because she's the one that has all the money in the house.
Mhm.
So she's going to one that's going to have to go to the bank. And then
Right.
all of a sudden he hung up the phone.
Yeah.
And then
so go ahead.
yeah. So he called me then and he said, where's, our daughter, my daughter? And he's like, well, she's at home. And he says, she's not in New Jersey? I'm like, no, what would she be doing in New Jersey? Well, I got a phone call saying she was at New Jersey at a wedding and she got drunk and she was arrested and she needs bail money. And I'm like, oh my God, what did you tell them? I said, did you give them your address? What information did you give them? And then he said, I really don't remember what I told them, which is even
And that's
more
hard too.
frightening.
Yeah. I mean, that right there, that puts the spotlight on why it's hard to even investigate these things afterwards, because I don't remember what I told them. I'm not exactly sure what I said. I'm not sure what they said,
Mhm.
And so from the beginning of the story, the resources aspect of it and the criminal aspect of it, what the elderly people who are the victims need to understand is, even if it's attempts, that the attempt of a crime, the penalty is the same as the commission of the crime. So, they should know that if someone is trying to scam them or, commit fraud, that the attempt is punishable just as much as the completed crime. So they need to let people know, because again, it's important for police to see patterns and to, have an understanding of what's going on at the time in the area. Another thing is regarding the grandparent scheme, that he didn't know her. I guarantee he didn't know her name. I guarantee she did not know the granddaughter's name. She got it in conversation, because that's one of the biggest things is, oh, hey, Grandpa, it's me. Well, who? Don't you recognize my voice? Jenny? Yeah, it's Jenny.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they just gave the person the information that now they're using to legitimize themselves to the grandparent. And so, and what's even scarier about it is that was either a national scam with a lot of resources, or a local scam because they were willing to have someone come pick them up. And that makes it even scarier. So what the elderly need to do, and it's kind of one of those things where you have to plan it in advance. You talk to them about it, you say, if this happens, if that happens, this is what you do. Because when, like your dad, he was caught off guard, and he this probably never crossed his mind before. Nope. So he's thinking he's problem solving, well, I don't have, but I can go to the bank. That immediately made their mouths start watering. And especially if they're local and they can come get them, he threw that out there which made them, oh, we got him and we're not going to give up. That's like a dog, getting a hold of the bone. They're like, nope, he gave us that. We're not letting up because we have him going down that path. Now we just got to encourage him because it was his idea. Oh, I can go to the bank. Now it's his idea, okay, we'll come get you. And so, it's important for them to be pre-warned and have knowledge and, to have outreach from the Department of Aging and the Council on the Elderly and organizations like you guys who can go and inform them in advance, of these are the things you have to be looking for. And again, the memory things, they need to be probably informed often, that, these are the things, because if they're informed in advance, it'll stand out to them right away. And they'll know, they'll have the response practice already, no, I need to talk to my daughter. Well, and they know that if they come back with anything other than okay, then the person's like, nope, click, and they hang up, and that also, when he said I can go to the bank, that was like blood in the water for the shark. You know what I mean? And if they hang up right away, the person's not committed to scamming you. They're not angry at you, especially if it's a local thing. They're no longer interested in you at all. And they just move on to the next one, So the sooner you end that interaction, the better off it is for the person, because they're no longer interested in you. You're off their radar, so they need to be warned in advance and be prepared in advance with almost scripted answers in advance if they come across these situations.
And that's exactly what
he was very embarrassed when he talked to me. He was extremely embarrassed.
And he didn't even, and he wasn't, and the scam wasn't even completed. He was embarrassed that he almost went down that road. Right.
And I said, what if you would have? And he says, well, I kind of just wanted to get more information. So I said, well, I hope you didn't give him a lot of information. Well, I don't remember. But then when all of us kids called him on it and talked to him and tried to put recommendations in place to protect him, he was very embarrassed, and he was very like,
Right.
you know, and we all thought this would not have happened if to my dad 10 years ago.
Right.
You know, with his age and with his
Right.
memory issues, this would not be something that he would have been a party to. He would have hung up right away, and that would have been
Right.
the end of it.
Well, and again, I think the older you get, the more you feel like you have less time to help. And so, you know, when someone asks for help, you're like, okay, you know, whereas 20 years ago, you'd have been like, no, what are you doing in New Jersey?
Yeah.
You know?
What are you doing there?
Yeah. Now
call
you're
your
like,
mother. Why are you calling
exactly.
me?
What you call me for? You know, you're the one.
Yeah, and they called him
Jersey.
first thing in the morning too. So he was just getting up. So,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
his day had not even really started.
And his memory of it, like you said, with the embarrassment, his memory of it might not be as bad as everybody as he's letting on. He may have given more information, not enough for them to actually succeed, but he might have given them more information that in hindsight, he was like, I can't believe I told them that, or gave them that, or told them, well, you know, we can go to my bank at this, you know, over in this area, you know. So he might have given them just some piece of information where it wasn't enough for them to complete the crime, but afterwards he realized like, oh, that was stupid. And so he's embarrassed to tell you guys even, you know?
Yeah.
So now you can't even help him out if he did give a little nugget of something that, okay, well, now we got to change your bank account or your, you know, so.
Which we did.
Yeah. You got to do all that afterwards anyways, no matter what they say.
I just want to throw out there real quick before we move on, because Mike talked about having like a scripted something. And I just want to tell our viewers and our listeners that when we release this video onto YouTube, we will have the blog post with it, which has some government agencies also to report, but we also have a checklist, and what it is a script. It's something that could be left by the phone to tell them when this call comes in exactly, you know,
Ask
what to
this
say.
question.
And
Yes. Like a flow chart. Yep. If they say this, you say that. Okay. If that, then hang up. That's perfect. Yeah. That's a great idea, because the prevention is so much easier than fixing it afterwards.
Exactly.
And the prevention is the most helpful to the potential victim, because they just move on. They don't care. It's just a numbers game for them. You know, they just hope that one out of however many thousand or whatever they'll get something from. And so if they just do it constantly, they'll make some, you know, they'll get something out of it. And the more people that hang up on them, the less lucrative it is for them. And hopefully they move on to victimizing somebody harder, because the elderly have kind of protected themselves by being prepared, you know?
Mike, is there anything else, you know, in police response, or is there anything as we're going through this? This is going to be kind of your time to talk about what you would like, or anything that you think would be pertinent for our viewers and our listeners to know about our elders.
Well, I think the most important thing is to ensure that the people that you guys interact with have or are aware of the resources that are available to them, because, and like you said, have knowledge in advance on what to do in a situation. They have to be aware of things like 90% of the criminals in these cases are their family, because they don't want to think that they don't, you know, and they have to understand that they are victims and that they do have rights still, you know, that it's not okay that their family members doing this or their family members doing that. And that's when it becomes hard from the police. The law enforcement aspect is we, you know, in those situations, we never even get called. And, you know, a lot of what we can do other than criminally investigating the, you know, the incident is make referrals to other agencies who can do follow-up. But if the ball never gets rolling because the elderly person isn't prepared, you know, to see that there's a crime being committed, to be, you know, they may not even recognize it because they think, oh, you know, little Johnny, he always takes money. You know what I mean? Something like that. But when they think of it over time, they're like, well, I'm getting, you know, my house is being repossessed and now I have nowhere to live, you know, that kind of thing. They have to be aware that they are actually being victimized, that there are resources available to them in advance. And they have to be reminded of the costs of not doing anything about it, and to not feel bad. You know, don't be embarrassed. Don't feel bad. If your grandson is robbing you blind, the police need to be involved. It's not okay. You know, it's not their fault. They didn't, you know, they don't have an obligation to throw away their entire, you know, life savings because they somehow feel responsible for something or something or something. Because the person who's robbing them blind is going to make them feel responsible. So the more you can do to prepare them in advance, the more they're aware of resources that are available to them in advance, the easier it is to prevent it. Because when it does happen, when law enforcement finally gets involved, it's usually way more devastating at that point because it got so bad that law enforcement got involved. And it's so much harder to investigate and convict people because it's such a long paper trail. It's happened over such a long period of time that they don't remember what they did with this or the receipts or anything like that. So the most important thing they can do is to be prepared in advance. And if they are, and they do get the police involved, do it right away and don't be embarrassed, and understand that the police know what you're going through. They've dealt with it. They've trained for it. They know that, they're not gonna, in a situation, there are some situations in law enforcement where you go, come on, you kind of put yourself in that situation, and, cause, a part of it is also, I guess, in law enforcement is kind of, mentoring people, kind of instructing them, teaching them, kind of like being their parents, but we're not going to do that to the elderly, in any capacity, because we know that they're mentally fragile, that they feel bad, that they're embarrassed, that they need to be, made to feel safe with calling us, that they are going to get, that there are results that are possible, that they're, that they are going to have, resources and safety and things like that. So the most important thing is their mindset in advance, and then to prevent it. And then if they do, they have to call, because, don't let it slide, and know that your interaction with law enforcement will be a good one. They care, and, they are there to help and want to help, but you have to call them to ask them.
Is there anything, Linda, in closing, or Mike in closing, that you'd like to share just to kind of wrap this subject up?
Yeah, one of the things that came at the forefront when I worked in, home health and in hospice is drug diversion. Medically fragile elderly and family members diverting pain medication from the elderly and selling it on the street or taking it themselves, and then they not wanting to report it either to the home health or to the hospice or to the police, because they were embarrassed that they allowed this to happen. And these are medications that they absolutely need to manage their pain and to give them a better quality of life, but yet they're embarrassed. So a lot of times we have to kind of be very sensitive to those areas. And if we know, or if we assess that this could be a problem in the individual's home, we provide lock boxes. We make sure that there are safety measures put in place so that the elder doesn't feel that they have to be a victim and or walk on tiptoes around their family members, because they're afraid that these things will go missing.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to
put that out there.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to giving them the confidence, because they have to know they're victims. They have to have someone other than the people who are victimizing them telling them things and giving them information, because again, they feel isolated, they feel embarrassed. Even just encouraging them to put a lockbox, that now is a slap in the face to the people who are taking it, or an insult to the people who are claiming they didn't take it. It wasn't me, it was somebody else. And now you're implying that I'm the one who's taking it by putting it in a lockbox, and those crimes actually are much easier to investigate.
Yes, they are.
Especially if there's any kind of, assisted living place or any kind of home involved at all, because, logs are kept of who came when, who visited, where they went, and not only that, but when they're narcotics or whatever, kind of drugs are stolen, they have to go without them, because if they don't report it, the doctor's probably not going to refill it.
Exactly.
Because they think, well, either you're overusing it, you're selling it, or I'm not going to keep providing you with pills that your family is stealing, or you're giving to your family to sell for money, kind of thing. Right. So if they don't report it, it doesn't get replenished. If they really need it, that's hard, So again, it has to do with them having information and being forewarned that 90% of the people who are going to abuse you are going to be your family. They are crimes. And you know what? If you don't give them that opportunity, they might have a better chance of having a more positive relationship with those people, because they're not allowing, even if they are bad people who would victimize them otherwise, if they don't let them be a victim, they actually end up with the relationship that they're hoping they get when they give them all these things or don't report it or whatever. you know, because the person's not victimizing them, because they're protecting themselves because they have the information.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's really it from my end.
Okay. Linda, was
Call
there
the
anything
police.
you?
Call the police. It's the most important thing, because we'll figure it out and you'll be, you know, you'll be taken care of.
Yeah, no, that nothing else. I just wanted to make sure that we, you know, that we were able to discuss this. I think all of these things are such important topics, and they're so relevant in today's world. And they're so relevant because, I mean, it was happened to my family.
Yeah.
It happened to my dad.
Well, I mean,
Never
you know,
thought
I mean,
it would happen to him.
you know, I mean, you know, from healthcare that, I mean, obviously this is your stats that, you know, how many people, because of the aging of the baby boomer generation, and, you know, that how many people are going to be available for these people to scam. It's going to be more than ever. And so there's going to be more people doing it, because it's going to be easier and easier with more victims available. So it's really important to, you know, to really push and get that information out there to try to help them, protect them.
Right. And a lot of our elderly people, I don't want to, you know, a lot of them, you know, like my parents' age in their late 80s and 90s, they're not technology savvy. So they can try to be, and sometimes they go on to the internet and they don't really know what they're doing, or don't have the proper firewalls, and get onto a site that they shouldn't be on, or can't, or shouldn't be anywhere near. And
Completely
then
fake,
they end up putting information in that ends up emptying out their bank accounts.
Oh yeah, I guarantee that there are a certain number of sites that if you Google or you do a web search for elderly abuse or elderly financial crimes, some of those returns are going to be scammers who have websites that are set up to falsely pretend they're helping you, but just give us this and give us that, and we'll put it in our name, and we'll protect you, and you know, they're acting like they're resources, but they're actually the suspects, and they're going to show up in that same search. So, you know, they won't know that.
Scary.
Yeah, that's why it's important. That's why it's important for them to use what they know, which is a phone. You know,
that's right.
Great point. Okay. Well, Mike, we just want to thank you so much. You've given us so much valuable information. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and just want to say thanks, Mike, again.
Happy to help.